Today, I'm going to talk to you about all the different variations of authors that you can see. So, when you're constructing references, I want to sort of give you some clues where you need to know, oh, I need to go back and find a reference for this specific case scenario. So, let's start off with a basic book. This is a whole author book, or one person is really responsible for writing the entire book. So in this case, we have Jackson LM. So this is sort of the standard. You do your last name first, comma, and first initials. So we have Jackson, comma, L period, M period. This book was published in 2019. The book title is The Psychology of Prejudice. It was published by the American Psychological Association. And here this is an ebook, and they give you a digital object identifier. And then this one here is an example of a print book where the author is Sapolsky, RM. And then they have the publisher, but because it's a print book, there is no URL or digital object identifier attached. Right? You are probably familiar with that name format already, or if you're not, you will be very shortly. But now what do you do with all these other little variations? So for example, in this case, this is an example of what I would call a report. So does money grow on trees? From the Atlantic Council, or Human Exploration of Mars, which was published by NASA. In this case, we have people who wrote things. So these are real people authors. And we have, in this instance, 3 names. So when you have more than one name, you continue on with your last name and then comma and then initials. Sometimes you don't have 2 initials. Sometimes you just have 1. That's fine. So we have Beryl P, period, comma, Larson M, or comma, M, period, comma, and when you get to the last name, you do that little ampersand symbol, and then you continue on with Archer, comma, M. So in this case, real people wrote this report, and 3 people wrote it. So that's how, like, if you have like 5 or 10 names, how you handle that last name is you do a comma and an and. Now, what happens if you have an article with lots and lots and lots of people, like this one here? Well, there's a way to do that. So this is an example of a journal article. And note, I'm clued off here that it's a journal article because I see this volume and issue appearing. So I know this is from Journal Physics letter B, and then this is the article title, Observation of a New Particle. So if you're out online, look for clues like volumes and issues. Elsevier and Science Direct are sort of publishers and vendors, and it's easier to confuse them sometimes as a journal name because they are flashier and have fancy logos. But really, you want to look for this information here. But anyway, back to our list of authors. How in the world do you handle this? Well, APA has rules for that. They say if you have 21 authors or more, then you set it up so you cite the first 19 authors and then you go ... and the last author. And we can see that here. Here are our first 20 authors. And instead of doing that comma ampersand, we do comma ... and then the very last name in the list. So these are the first 19 authors, ... and then the last name. And then we continue on with this entry with 2019. The article title is Indie Pop Rocks, and then it's from the Journal of Improbable Mathematics. And then this is that volume 27, issue 1, the page numbers, and then this is the digital object identifier. So this is convenient if you have a whole mess of authors and you don't know how to handle it, but also know that you can't be lazy and just do an et al in your final reference. If you've got an article that has 15 or 20 authors, you need to list all of them still. Now, if you're citing this in a discussion board or in a paper, then that et al. Comes in, where you can see they cite the first author, they do ETAL period, comma, and then the publication date. So this is the example that what you would use, like if you cited a direct quote, like so-and-so said blah, 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 or according to blah, 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 you could do it that way as well. So this is what you do with lots of authors. Now, what do you do, say, when you have an edited book or a chapter in an edited book? So a lot of your textbooks may operate this way, or occasionally you'll see a book of essays or a book of papers. So in this instance, you're reading a chapter in a book. So you want to cite what you're reading and their authors. But then in this case, there's also an additional editor or editors who are sort of responsible for sort of piecing everything together into a whole work, such as a book. So this is a chapter in an edited book. So let's look at this middle example here. In this case, we have an author, Dillard J.P., who wrote the chapter Currents in the Study of Persuasion. However, this isn't a standalone, piece. It appears in the book Media Effects, Advances in Theory and Research, and the editors of this whole book are M.B. Oliver, A.A. Rainey, and J. Bryant, and then that's tagged with the EDS. So note here that they've switched up the initials on you. So here, standard author format, last name Dillard, comma, first initials J period, P period. In this one, we have M.B. Oliver, A.A. Rainey, and J. Bryant. So they've switched stuff around on you, and they've also plus the in. So this is a small piece in Media Effects, Advances in Theory and Research, and then they tag the editors this way. So in this case, you sort of have two groups of people who are somehow responsible for putting this book together. Note also that you'll sometimes see the ED tag. This is the editor's tag. If it's a single person, it's just ED. If it's multiple people, it's EDS period. Sometimes you can have an editor of one book, so you'll see this little tag float to the beginning or in this area here. This is a chapter in an edited book. So that's common scenarios you'll see when you have real peoples as authors. But we know things get tricky when you go online and suddenly real people disappear, and now you have large agencies or non-governmental organizations or nonprofit organizations who are responsible for producing lots and lots of work where there are many people involved, but there's not necessarily one individual author. So in this case, this is a report by a government agency. This is from the National Cancer Institute of Health. Taking Time, Support for People with Cancer. So that's the title of the report. And then sort of the overall parent agencies were the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the National Institutes of Health, and they're split by the comma. And then we have a link to the PDF here. So a lot of times on U.S. government websites, you want to cite sort of the technical agency that you're looking at and reading from, but if you see sort of that long chain of like U.S. Department of Human Services, that's going to go in this field right here. So sort of this is the publisher field. And I'm going to open up this link and see where it takes us, right? So here, National Cancer Institute is right front and center, but then down here you see these publishers, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the National Institutes of Health. So these are the parent agencies. This is sort of the direct agency that is responsible for publishing this report. So that's sort of how you handle government reports when you don't have a real author, but you have a long list of agencies. Now let's take a look at a simpler example. So this one is from the World Health Organization, and there is no real author. So you're going to move the World Health Organization into the title role. It was published in 2018, May 24th. The title of the web page is the top 10 causes of death. Notice this middle field is missing. So this is where sort of the National Institutes of Health would go. And then it's the World Health Organization website is here. And then again, if you were going to cite this in a discussion board or a paper, these are the options you have to cite in text. So occasionally you'll see, when you see reference examples out there, they assume there's a real person. So what you can do is that you can just sort of adapt. So here is a web page on a website. The website overall is AARP. The web page is, are you ready to move your aging parent into your home? The author is Horowitz B. So if this guy dropped off, didn't exist, what you would do is that you would move AARP into the author position, sort of like this one here, where you have the World Health Organization up top. So in this case, there's no real person and there's only one organization, or it's sort of that publisher organization is the author and the publisher are the same thing. So you're only going to list the World Health Organization once